Okay, well, I guess we're live. So anyone who is joining us on X or on YouTube or in our Telegram community, thanks so much for joining us. And you're certainly welcome to pop questions into the chat. And we've got RoboMcGobo here from Stride. And so welcome, man. It's good to connect and hear your voice. And dude, I appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Excited
Yeah,
to
of
be
course. There's a lot going on with Stride, and I figure before we get to the meat of it, it probably makes sense just so people can get a feel for who you are to tell us how you became the head of growth at Stride and what you were doing before that and all this sort of good stuff.
Yeah, totally. So prior to I got back into the crypto Web3 space in about 2019. Prior to that, I was an attorney in California, and I was
Oh,
I
wow.
was yeah, I was practicing kind of like practicing law, and then was always on the computer, but had a separate screen open with like the price tickers and everything. Onboarded to Cosmos relatively early, with Adam and AKT were, I think, two of my first buys, and then came around to 2021 with the Osmosis launch was really when things started to kind of take off, and I found myself like getting annoyed that my job as an attorney was getting in the way of me getting to do crypto stuff. So right about then, I kind of made the jump to into crypto full time. Started doing stuff with Osmosis early on, and then I was actually working with Nomad during the exploit. Yeah, and so the long story there, but interesting time to jump into crypto with basically right after that Terra happens, the Nomad
Right.
exploit happened, FTX shortly after that. So it's been a journey, but right around that time was also when Stride launched, and I was super interested in liquid staking early on. Thought it was just an incredible primitive that unlocked a lot of really cool, new and different DeFi use cases, and hadn't really seen like large adoption outside of Ethereum yet. So I started getting involved kind of like informally with Stride, like offering to help with governance proposals and just kind of doing, uh, big Stride bag holder early on, right? And just as I was like between opportunities, the Stride had kind of an opening in the growth department, so worked out really well.
Wait, so how do you go about finding that opening?
It's I just I mentioned to Aiden, Riley, and Vishal that I was like between opportunities, so I was always doing like little things for them here and there. And I just told them like, hey, if there's anything you guys need me to do, I've got some more free time. And they were like, yeah, actually, we have this full-time role that just opened up. So it was,
That's awesome.
yeah, kind of fell into it. Like it wasn't,
And
I wasn't really actively looking for anything full-time, but
wait, so for the crypto investors who are listening, who wish that they could do something like this for a living, how did you meet Aiden, Riley, and Vishal?
yeah. So this is actually like I think a really good general point about this is like if you really want to get into crypto full time and you just love like super passionate about this space, just get involved with the projects that you care about,
Yeah.
contribute, do things. People notice, right? Like I started with Osmosis basically as just like a Discord mod. And then I went from there to like leading the grants program, and got pretty close with Josh and Sunny, and um, it, people are actively looking for great people in the community that have a lot of value to contribute. And if that's you, just get out there and do it. Right, you're going to get noticed. You're going to get you know like contributions do not go on unnoticed. I think is the best way to kind of say that. Um, so yeah, I just generally like throughout that process met Aiden, Riley, and Vishal, and um, you know really have always appreciated the Stride team, and just like how fast and how hard they work to ship really great products.
Yeah, so I mean, I remember the sprint, when Quicksilver and P Stake were, kind of neck and neck in the beginning, and Stride was impressive with how fast you guys move, and I certainly thought that the marketing and promotion arm of the team, and I don't know if that was you or who handled that, but you guys were super visible, and at the time, Lido was kind of gobbling up just I guess I don't know what I'm like the term liquid staking.
Mhm.
And I remember in the very beginning, if you wanted to get a delegation from Lido, you had to turn over your private keys as a validator. And so we turned it down. And in hindsight, that was stupid. But it was good to see a competitor and especially in Cosmos, come out of nowhere. And so yeah, we were stoked to see you guys.
Yeah, and I mean the great thing about Cosmos liquid staking is it's so actually like far ahead of Ethereum liquid staking now, and just how I mean Lido has actually come like a very long way since the times where you'd have to hand over your private key, but like Cosmos liquid staking can be done fully in protocol, fully permissionlessly, as trustlessly as you can get, right? Like the security underlying the Stride protocol is the same as the security underlying the Cosmos Hub, because we rely on the Cosmos Hub validators for consensus.
Well, let me ask you this. So there is a little bit of controversy about the liquid staking module. And I guess for the people who are listening who don't know what that is, if you're staking Atom, you can go to Stride and then convert your staked Atom into liquid staked Atom and keep it with the same validator. And at least when the LSM came out, it was, I think, by default turned on. And then scammers were using it to unbond people's stake and steal. And so some people didn't like that, and they wanted it to be off by default, et cetera, et cetera. And so where is Stride now with the liquid staking module?
Yeah, so I think things have kind of changed a lot with the LSM since launch. Like obviously, there's been more than one controversy related to the LSM, but we kind of looked into it, and it's like a pretty small amount of our liquid stakes that actually come from the LSM. And so it's not been something that's been like top priority for us lately, but the ICL is doing some pretty great work. I think they've got a software upgrade either live or going live here in the next week or so for the Cosmos Hub that will basically deprecate the LSM and replace it with something called the X Liquid module. So it'll it kind of like changes some of the security assumptions, especially on the code base. But yeah, I think we'll kind of need to wait to see how they've like what tweaks they've made to the design and things like this.
Is that something that is you're able to turn on or off as a staker, or is it just a totally different creature?
I don't know, to be fully honest. We haven't gotten too many details on it, so it's I don't want to give an answer.
No, it's all good.
End up being wrong.
Yeah. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No worries, no worries.
So if we go back to Stride's sprint, to get out there as the preferred liquid staking provider in the Cosmos, what was it that prompted the pivot to the Eureka DEX and Stride DEX and trying to be the go-to place for swaps and bridging?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things that kind of prompted this decision. The first is that we saw liquid staking as this, like I think everyone did see this. Liquid staking is like a massive market. Lido has done such an incredible job at capturing that huge chunk of the market. But outside of Ethereum, the market, like the LST market, has not taken off very significantly. Like the next largest place, I think by far, would be Solana. And I think even in Solana, the liquid staking penetration is something like 2 or 3%. So the addressable market's pretty small, and you need to be able to, I think, really differentiate. You need to provide something unique and different. So we kind of saw this as an opportunity to, like the liquid staking side of the business isn't going anywhere. It's going to be used instead to sort of like level up the Stride DEX and give it superpowers, right? So we saw this opportunity to kind of like really double down on our conviction with the Cosmos Hub, but B, also bring something unique and different to the market by kind of combining this liquid staking and decentralized exchange model into something new and unique and interesting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw, I think in the news, I forget if it was yesterday or today, that Marinade Sol, liquid staked Sol, is included in a new ETF application, which I think is the beginning of all that stuff. And so, how cool would it be to have liquid staked Cosmos assets in ETFs and Stride, behind all that? That would be awesome.
Yeah, when ST Atom ETF.
Right, totally. So when you guys were doing your deep dive and researching, DEXs across ecosystems, like what, so I realize you want to offer something different with the LST combined with the DEX. I'm not sure I fully understand, what the challenge is that's being solved. Is it just additional yield for people who participate? Like, help me understand that.
Yeah, so there are a couple different ways that the products can kind of like complement each other. I think one of the most interesting ones is revenue rehypothecation. So just as an example, like, if you are an LPer in a concentrated liquidity pool, and you've got this sort of like large proportion of capital that goes out of range at any given time, liquidity that's, in a wide enough band out of range and at a certain safety margin, you could actually envision that being liquid staked so that you can continue to earn staking rewards or revenue on your LP position even after it's gone out of range, which is one I think helps with the more passive LP experience. And then on the other side of things, this is something I'm particularly interested in. If you have, the DEX fees can scale pretty significantly, right? Well, why not redirect some of that to ST Atom, for example, to boost the yield to liquid stake Atom to make it higher than the native staking yield, right? I think this is one of the big barriers to adoption, especially
No
for
doubt. I mean, how are
institutions.
you going to beat 14, 15% native staking APR? That's tough.
Right. Right. And I mean, the fact of the matter is like Stride takes a commission, right? And it's hard to quantify what the potential loss in market share is from that commission. But if you were able to, if you had users that said, I could stake and earn 14%, or I could liquid stake and earn, 15, 16, 17%, the choice should be obvious, right? Like be able to kind of exit your position immediately, get higher staking rewards, use them in DeFi, and it's certainly, I think, an interesting different demand case for LSTs in that case.
Yeah. So I've been absolutely obliterated with impermanent loss, a couple years ago using Uniswap. And so I'm pretty gun shy on LPs. I've got a few with Ellis. So shout out to Hasham and the Ellis team. They certainly make it really simple to contribute liquidity. But yeah, I mostly just stake. And so I like being passive in that way. It's just simple. And so I think I'm excited when the Stride DEX is launched to play around and to kind of see what's what. I know you guys are targeting bridge users, and I think I maybe asked you this beforehand, but I have found it easier to just like Kepler. I think is just a kick-ass wallet, and I love Leap as well. And no disrespect to Cosmos Station, but just simply doing an IBC send from one chain to another. Once you do it a couple of times, it's super simple. And so I know that using the bridge function on the Stride DEX as a platform is one way to bring in users. So I guess what would you say to me when I say, hey man, I just do it in wallet. It's pretty simple to do it that way. Like how do you convince people to connect to the DEX and to bridge that way?
Yeah, so that's not maybe like necessarily the goal. I think there are two elements to this, right? First, we're not trying to take single asset bridge activity away from Kepler, for example. It's not really the market. But I think the example that you gave is actually a good one that illustrates why Stride is important. Because like, let's say, like you want to bridge Atom from the hub and end up in STTIA on the Stride chain, for example. If you were to just do all of this by itself, you'd have to like, use Kepler to bridge Atom to Osmosis, make the swap on Osmosis, bridge back to Stride, 3 different operations, super annoying, right? Or you could just use, SkipGo, the upcoming Stride API, or even Kepler wallet itself to make this like in-wallet swap, do it all in one transaction, right? And once Stride has launched, a lot of that swap volume is just going to direct right through the Stride LPs. And that's really the order flow that we're targeting.
So we're kind of getting, I had the plan to ask these questions later on, but I'm going to go ahead.
Sure.
So I heard during your conversation, I guess it was a couple weeks ago with Joe 2.0. So shout out to Joe 2.0, and I encourage everyone to follow him on X. That Stride aims to provide the best execution for multi-chain and multi-ecosystem assets. And if I'm using skip.go or IBC Fund or Cosmos, I don't even know what the URL is now, but if I'm using Skip and it's searching for the best price, or maybe it's the quickest path to fill the order behind the scenes, like help us understand what happens behind the scenes when someone places that trade using the DEX with Skip under the hood. Is the Stride DEX grabbing native liquidity, or is it aggregators that are pulling liquidity from other DEXs? Like help us understand what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so aggregators like SkipGo, for example, will basically, like when a trader punches in whatever it is they want to trade, SkipGo in the background queries the sort of like the exchange rates on various different exchanges. It picks the one that is either gives you the best price or is the fastest. I think you can in their interface you can choose what your preference is, and then it picks that DEX and swaps through it, right? So the Stride UI will be slightly different, but pretty close to this experience. We'll probably prioritize native liquidity where we have it on Stride, but we at the same time want to make sure that, if there are other DEXs or like other assets that people want to trade that we don't support, we want to provide a venue for that as well. Even if that means plugging into DEXs that some people might call competitors.
But I think that one of the things, what brought me into Cosmos was the Osmosis airdrop.
Mhm.
And, once I got in, I was like, holy shit, this ecosystem is so much better than Ethereum. And I stayed. So I love Osmosis. We're a validator for Osmosis and Ellis, and a governor for Stride. So we like to support all you guys. And I have noticed, certainly over the last year, I think that teams have gone from being competitors to more like being collaborators. And it seems like what you're saying is, if Stride doesn't have the liquidity for the trade on the DEX, that behind the scenes, it's going to go find the liquidity from Osmosis or Ellis or DUIDX or Persistence. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah. And we'll probably roll that feature out fairly slowly, but I think the fact of the matter is we just can't we can't support liquidity for everything, but we want to be the everything DEX. So, something's got to give, right? But yeah, like we will for certain assets that we want to target, we'll push users out to maybe Osmosis or possibly even like Tower on Babylon, for example. Or there are a couple of other ecosystems that we're talking with where this is potentially an attractive selling point for them.
Do I assume in the beginning you guys are targeting, I assume, Atom, USDC, ETH, Sol, and maybe Wrap Bitcoin?
Yeah, just thinking through all these 1 second. Yeah, so that's about right, I think, from like a blue chip perspective. There are also a couple of other, I think, blue chip / long tail assets that people want to get in Cosmos but have a very hard time getting a hold of. I think the best example of this is TIA. I can't tell you how many threads I've seen. It's like, how the hell do I buy this, right? So we want to make sure that it's super easy for people to do that all from one UI.
Gotcha. I know Atom alignment is certainly top priority, and I know hub devotees are certainly the market that you guys are trying to appeal to. Is the DEX going to live on Stride chain or live on the hub or be part of the hub?
It'll live fully on the Cosmos Hub
It
as
will.
an
And
anchor.
so
Yeah.
I guess, so then how does, if it lives on the hub, like Ellis lives on the hub, is it more of a competitor or more of a collaborator kind of thing with Ellis?
I definitely see it as like a collaborative product, right? We are facilitating a much easier onboarding routes to Ellis than currently exist today, like via Eureka specifically, right? So if people want to go from their ETH on Ellis to, like, for example, Paxos Gold, right? Or
Sure.
sorry, ETH on Ethereum to Paxos Gold, which is, I think only Ellis supports this in the ecosystem right now. They could swap, like they could pick a route through Stride to get there. And it makes it easier than them having to like do it locally on Ethereum through like a number of different transactions, pay a bunch of gas to do all that stuff on Ethereum when you can just pay like, pennies on the dollar to do it on the hub instead.
Nice. So let's get a little granular, I guess.
Sure.
If the DEX is going to live on the hub, what happens to Stride validators? And then is it partial set secured validators, hub validators that then spin up infrastructure to support the DEX separately from the Stride chain? And then what happens to governors like us?
Yeah. So today, Stride is validated by the majority of the Cosmos Hub validator set via replicated security. We are top, I believe, 95% chain. So the top 95% of Cosmos Hub validators have to validate for Stride, or else they risk, like a slash.
Sure.
And as a lot of people have pointed out, like, it's not very economical for the smaller validators, especially. So as part of this, we're going to be migrating to partial set. And still not fully clear what that looks like, but essentially, people will have the option to sort of opt into validating Stride if they want to, or if they see it as being feasible for them.
And that's separate from Stride DEX, is that right?
Yeah, that'll basically be this. The Stride chain is responsible still for all of the liquid staking logic. There's the hyperlane deployments that are on the Stride chain that will be kind of run by the hyperlane set still, but the validating for the Stride chain is still important to make sure that STAtom, STTL, all the big like Stride LSTs continue to work as they're supposed to.
So tough question then. Since right now it's replicated security and the hub validators who are large enough and have enough voting power are forced to run infrastructure for the Stride chain. When the announcement's made that you guys are going to shift over to partial set security, how do you prevent too many validators from shutting down too early? Like, how do you incentivize them?
Yeah. So again, just want to make sure that I'm giving the caveat that this is still early and could change. But
Fair enough. Fair enough.
the nice
Yeah, and I'm
thing,
hitting you with kind of a tough question.
no, it's good. Like I think this is something that we should be chatting about a bit more. We have like 3 to 4 million Atom and delegations that we can delegate to people. I would love to see there be a kind of like a close relationship between our PSS validator set and our STAtom set. And I think that this would be, like probably a pretty attractive option for folks.
Gotcha. And so I guess the one thing I'm still not 100% clear on, when the Stride DEX launches on the hub, that is a separate partial set secured validator set versus the Stride liquid staking blockchain validator set?
No, so the DEX will be kind of like irrespective of any validators, right? It's just going to be a smart contract or a set of smart contracts that lives on the Cosmos Hub.
Okay. Now I get it. So is it CosmWasm or something different?
I think we'll have to wait, and see. It hasn't been fully announced yet, but the hub is launching a new EVM, and it'll be built on, or a new like
Right.
VM
I forgot about that.
built on that. Yeah.
Okay. So here's kind of a tough question. So IBC Eureka uses a single relay connection, right? And so it doesn't require 100 relayers in order to bring in assets from all over the place to one user interface.
Mhm.
And so does Does that make numerous bridged connections from Axelar obsolete? Is just my straight up question.
Sure. Yeah. So I think Axelar is in a really interesting position. I think intuitively you would think that having an IBC native option would make Axelar obsolete. But if you look at solutions like, what Osmosis has done, for example, with alloys, Axelar assets still make up the overwhelming majority of those alloys, and even of like asset pairs on Osmosis, right? There's still, I believe, like Axel USDC pools that are like make up a huge chunk of Osmosis's TVL. And I would have, I would have thought that CCTP would just basically make any USDC transfers obsolete. Well, it turns out that's not necessarily the case, right? So I do think, Axelar will still have an important place in the ecosystem. I know that they are doing a couple of interesting bespoke things with some new Eureka chains. So, interesting stuff will be happening there. I'm not worried for Axelar at all, to be honest. I think they're gonna still have an important place in the ecosystem following this.
Good. I mean, I hope so. I'm not certainly rooting for their downfall. I'm just trying to understand the tech. I came from traditional finance, and so when it comes to a lot of the technology, it's over my head. And I understand economics and finance, but not necessarily the zeros and ones under the hood.
Sure.
So Stride has the luxury, I guess, of tapping existing order flow. But users need to come to your user interface, right? They got to come to the DEX. So what's the plan to attract them? And what are the yield opportunities, or how do you guys intend to attract liquidity providers and users?
Yeah. So a quick kind of background on this, right, and I think you mentioned you might have caught this on Joe's space as well, but
I think so, yeah.
For existing DEXs, like Osmosis or Uniswap or Radium, all of these, a very, very small portion of trading volume actually comes from the DEX UIs. Like it ranges from 15% to maybe like 25% on some other DEXs.
Yeah, I remember hearing you say that.
Yeah. And so where's the balance coming from, right? It's coming from aggregators. It's coming from, the Jupiters of the world, the Skipgos of the world, the, Li-Fis and Polarises of the world. So we kind of have a luxury of knowing that as long as we give that order flow the best execution, it's going to route through Stride, kind of regardless. So we have this, kind of like, we know that we can get the order flow as long as the liquidity is there. So the question then becomes, how do we optimize the experience to put LPs first on the UI, right? Because that's what the bulk of the UI activity will end up being. And, so there are a few ways that we're looking at doing this. One is the revenue rehypothecation thing that I mentioned to you before. That's kind of like a small part of it.
Okay.
Another big one is vaults. So you mentioned that you are not a fan of passive LP or of actively doing concentrated liquidity.
I'm dipping my toe back in after having my ass kicked, I think is a better way to put it.
Yeah. So we plan to make it as easy as we possibly can to do that, right? So there are vaults that can basically, all you need to worry about is depositing, and the vaults will handle the liquidity reallocation strategy for you. There are a couple of existing providers that do a really good job of this in the ecosystem that we're hoping to work with, but I think, we want to give a bunch of different options for vaults that have varying different risk profiles. Some will be focused more on capital efficiency so that, foundations and teams are more comfortable using it. Others will be focused on fees so that, the regular LPs that are trying to yield max can get the opportunity to do that. So we want to make sure that the passive experience isn't just this throw your liquidity into a full range position and earn 1% APR until you die, right? we want to actually give people a really good passive LP experience.
So, let me jump in real quick. I heard Vishal say it was a different validator who hosted him a couple of days ago. And so my apologies to that validator because I don't recall his name. Otherwise, I'd say shout out to whomever. I think he said something about Stride Stride DEX superpower being automated hooks and triggers. And so I'm wondering, is it automation that manages the vaults, or are there is it more human behind the scenes? Like help me understand how that works.
Yeah, it depends on the vaults, but most of them are probably going to be, actually, I take that back. Some of them will be built as separate contracts. They'll be their own protocols, and we will just allow people to access them from the UI, Stride's UI. We think it's kind of messy to to like have to link out, and then you go to a site that you don't really have any control over the user experience, and all of that. So we'd like to bake those right into the Stride UI, where we can make the experience as clean and as tight as possible, so people don't have to leave. But there are other vaults that we're going to launch as hooks that'll kind of be like, automated. And these are the same kinds of things that will allow people to, for example, borrow against their LP positions. I know I'm kind of like, it's getting a lot out there all at once.
But... No, I mean, I saw something, I think, on Twitter yesterday that Nolus is, you can borrow, I want to say Bitcoin from Nolus, and it's maybe 0% APR until the end of June, I think. And so is that, I don't know if that really relates, but I think I understand what you mean as far as like borrow against your position.
Yeah, so it's basically like when I say borrow against your position, in most cases you have to make a choice between, okay, do I LP or do I deposit my assets in a lending market, for example, and borrow against it? And both have very different yield strategies.
Definitely.
We want to make it so that you don't have to choose. We want to make it so that you can just LP your assets, earn the yield from the LP, earn incentives from the LP, earn all of that. But at the same time, take that LP position, toss it into a lending market and borrow against it so that you can do things like leveraged looping, or you can long or short an asset against your LP position to like take advantage of opportunities as they come up without having to like un-LP and eat any impermanent loss or do, whatever.
So these are all smart contracts you're talking about, these vaults?
The vaults they'd be smart contracts.
And so if I'm a user on the DEX, is there some sort of display? Like, how do I know what the triggers are in the smart contract and exactly what it's doing?
Yeah, so I think like
question, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm non-technical myself, so I wouldn't be able to walk through like the intricacies of it, but I do know that we're working on a user interface that'll make it very easy to see exactly what's happening under the hood. So you'll be like kind of walked through the steps, because remember, Stride is going to be sort of like this kind of like cross-chain first DEX, so you should actually be able to like LP in one or two transactions from other chains, right? So like you'll have like, ETH on Ethereum and USDC on the hub, and you'll be able to see this process of your ETH being transferred to the hub and LP'd against the USDC, for example.
That's sweet. Yeah. Super cool. I heard something a while ago. I don't know, maybe people were debating buy and burn Stride versus buy and LP the tokens. Can you help me understand what that conversation was about?
Sure, yeah. So Stride's 80% of Stride's revenues from the DEX and the liquid staking protocol will be going towards buying back and burning Stride. The other 20% will go towards buyback and burn of Atom. So that's kind of like the default, right? There are other options and things that could be done in the future with that revenue that I think are particularly interesting. Buying and LPing assets is another one. So like using this to target not just really good liquidity depth for STRD, but also for other assets that we really care about. So Atom, I think, is of course like another really big one, is like, buy back a bunch of Atom, LP it. It's the ecosystem blue chip asset. We want to have like the deepest pool for that. I think that liquidity should live on the hub,
And so do I assume, since we're a Stride governor, that would be like a proposal that we vote on whether or not to do that, or would it be separate and something that the team just kind of says, hey, we're doing this now?
No, anything to do with Stride revenue is going to be up to Stride governance. So you as a governor, I'm also a governor, we would be voting on those things. I'd probably have to abstain, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. Well, cool, man. I think we're kind of getting towards the end. Here's a big question. WEN. When is this? When do we get to play?
I won't say soon TM, I promise. So we're targeting July. We're still a little unclear because the VM is not deployed on the Cosmos Hub yet. So I think
That's with the next upgrade, I guess.
I don't believe so. It'll probably be a bit farther out.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so we're kind of blocked on those timelines. I could feasibly see it bleed over into August, but yeah, July's the target, and we kind of hope we hit it.
Gotcha. Well, so today is the last day of school for my kids, and that school's out for summer. They're going to be partying here pretty soon, and so I won't keep you for too much longer. Do you have any closing thoughts, or I don't know if there are any comments. I don't think anyone's asked any questions in the chat, but yeah, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just if you want to stay up to date on the developments of the DEX, join our Telegram group. It's linked in our Stride Twitter profile.
And you know what? I'll pop a link to it, underneath this conversation on socials as well.
Amazing. That would be great. Yeah. And that's the Telegram is the place where you can hop in, and all of the team is in there, the founders. They're super psyched to chat with people and get feedback on the DEX, like feature requests, what you think we should add, asset support, all of that good stuff. So please come in and talk to us. We'd love to to chat with anyone and everyone.
Nice. And then I guess I'll close with we're blessed. I think we validate 12 or 13 different chains, but we really want to be an active validator on the Cosmos Hub. And so we're holding a promotion for people who stake their Atom with us while we are inactive. And you can not only get a monthly airdrop rebate for up to 5 years, but starting right now, we are going to offer limited mint inscriptions for the first 50 people who stake 50 Atom with us. And Kepler Mobile makes it pretty difficult to stake with an inactive validator, but it's not so hard in the other wallets. And or you can connect. I think our link is up on the screen. It's promo.atlas-staking.com, and you can connect any Cosmos wallet and stake with us, and we'll send you a limited mint inscription that will hopefully be worth a few bucks down the road. So we would appreciate the support. And yeah, Robo, super good to hear your voice, man. I'm super glad to connect, and I hope you have just an amazing Thursday and the rest of the week.
Yeah, you too, man. Thanks so much for hosting us, and I hope you get active in the set. These spaces are great, so I hope
awesome.
People contribute and support validators.
Cool. Thank you, man. Well, be well, everybody who is listening. Thank you so much. Be well. Talk to you soon.